The American people have been clear. They don't like this terrible law.
The job of Congress is not to defend failure.
I'm going to eliminate every non-essential, expensive program I can find. That includes Obamacare, and I'm going to work to reform and save.
You're a real big shot. You're a real big shot. Shut your mouth.
Good evening, everybody, and welcome to RFL. I'm Richard French, and thank you so much for joining us this Wednesday evening, July 11th. A lot to cover in the next 60 minutes, but up first, wasting time. Many argue another vote today on repealing Obamacare, but before it even got started, we already knew how it was going to end, and that is going nowhere fast. Why are they doing this in Washington? And next, Battle Royale. We'll sit down with a Republican candidate for Senate, and he's vying to represent Connecticut. We're going to talk about a race that is turning out to be a real showdown. And later, a tough sell. Well, as you heard there in the opening clip, Mitt Romney went to the NAACP today, but while he might be polling in single digits with the African-American community, was it a smart move at the end of the day to appeal to an electorate that isn't buying at least what he's selling? We'll talk about that appearance. And then races to watch, more competitive races in the region than you may realize here, and you might be surprised how many could swing the other way. Andrew will break it all down for us. It's all coming up on this edition of RFL. But let's begin with the vote yet again on Obamacare today, and the senior political correspondent Andrew Whitman, he's in first position with that.
Well, Rich, as expected, the House again voted to repeal health care reform today. It is the 33rd time they've done so since the GOP took control of the House in 2010. But repeal is dead in the Senate, leading to lots of complaints that Congress is just wasting time and playing election year politics instead of focusing on creating jobs and helping Americans, which may in part explain why Congress's approval rating is just 18%, and that is the highest it has been in this poll average since August of last year. Rich?
All right, Andrew, thank you very much. And let's bring in our panel on this and much more. Dominic Carter, of course, political journalist and author, former representative and current Republican candidate for U.S. Senate from the great state of Connecticut, Chris Shays, and as we said, Andrew Whitman. All right, I'll throw you right into the fire here. If you were in the House today, how would you have voted? Because we know how this story ends. It's never going to get through the Senate, and it's certainly not going to get a signature from the president's desk, other than a veto if it ever did get through the Senate. So isn't there better stuff to do than go through this political show?
Well, I mean, I've been at the Congress where they spend days just deciding how to name a post office. So, I mean, compared to what? Compared to what Congress does? No, I think a 5-hour debate, setting the stage, allowing both sides to make their arguments.
But we've heard this debate, and we've heard this debate 33 times. How many times do you have to do this to make a point?
Did you hear the debate before the court case or after? This is a fascinating circumstance. You had the Democrats bring out a bill that they said it wasn't a tax. Then they go before the Supreme Court and say it is a tax. And now that the Supreme Court said, well, it's only constitutional because it's a tax, and then they now are saying it's not a tax again. No, I think this is a debate that we need to have. And I'll just say this to you. I think ultimately this bill is going to cost a lot of lives because it's going to discourage the kind of research that you need. One last point, you know, people focus on providing health care insurance. Really what I want are cures so that people don't need insurance for diseases that can be cured.
Debate is healthy in this country. God knows we do it every night here for an hour, and I like that. But the scene that I saw unfold, and it wasn't just Republicans, okay? One guy had a picture of Boss Ogg from the Dukes of Hazzard here and went on as to this bill. Another lawmaker, including from our region, had a picture of Campbell's soup, I think, here, talking about that it was bad. My point is, there's got to be better stuff to do. We've heard this debate. The Supreme Court ruled. We've done this 33 times already, and it's not shocking stuff like this gets the approval rating of Congress approaching single digits. And you know, you were there for a lot longer than any of us. I'm
not going to argue that 33 is too much. I'm just saying I think they needed to have a debate since they've had the court decision, and that's my point. The court made a stunning ruling, and so let's talk about the ramifications of it. It will be, I think, repealed next year if Republicans control the House and the Senate. They won't need 60 votes to repeal it in the Senate. They just need 50 votes to repeal the tax.
From the optics of it, guys, and we got to move on to the next subject, it didn't look good today, I don't think, for anybody. And since the GOP are driving this issue, do they got to be careful with this, especially given their nominee?
Of course.
And his position.
It just confirms why the American public is not happy with Congress. It just confirms that it's sharply divided, that this is a vote that we could have told you the results, give or take a few on the numbers, before they even did it. It's a complete waste of taxpayer time.
You were showing me today the numbers on this, Andrew. Literally, I think it was 47-47 that the public completely split down the middle whether they like this.
Can I ask one question? No, even if we know the results, I mean, anytime we know the results, we shouldn't have a vote?
We should, but as you said yourself, there is a point where it becomes grandstanding and it's not about principle anymore. I understand objections and they're deep-seated, but 33 times. I mean, there is stuff to do, I would think. Now, listen, I don't think anybody of us, including our guest tonight, would mind having many, many millions in the bank here. It's a good thing. It's part of the American dream. But it might not be if your name is Mitt Romney right now. And Andrew, you explained, because we're talking about taxes and bank accounts, whether here or abroad.
I don't think Mitt Romney's looking to trade bank accounts with me at this point, but Mitt Romney's wealth is causing him some political headaches. You never know. You know about the attacks with Mitt Romney's history with Bain Capital, the car elevator, all the other stories. Now Romney's under pressure to release more info about his taxes and his holdings. Romney has released only his taxes for 2010, nothing more. We've already learned that Mitt paid just 14% in taxes in 2010. He says he'll pay about 15% for 2011, but hasn't provided any proof. Meanwhile, we know that Mitt's worth about $250 million and that some of his money goes overseas, some to a Swiss bank account, others to tax shelter accounts in the Caymans, and other money to a corporation he set up in Bermuda. In the meantime, Romney is taking fire from all sides for not being more open about his money and his taxes.
He wants you to show your papers, but he won't show us his.
And so far, this is all Governor Romney has said in his defense.
My investments have been held by a blind trust, have been managed by a trustee. I don't manage them, don't even know where they are. We've released all the information required by law and then some.
Rich?
Congressman, you have been a candidate many times, and do you ever hesitate releasing your returns?
Well, transparency is really important, and when Mitt Romney really hit a stone wall is when he started to equivocate on his taxes. It's going to come out.
Right.
Just do it.
Well, why not bite the bullet? I don't get this one, Dom. It makes it look like you got something to hide. And then when he's like, I don't even know what's in there. Listen, for me, I wasn't sure about this story, certainly in the primaries, but I would have thought by now, once he got through the primaries, he would have got this stuff out there. He's got to do it sooner than later. What's he waiting for?
Well, in fairness to Mr. Romney, it's, as he said, it's handled by a blind trust. So he does have some cover there. But I agree with you and the congressman. In this case, whatever's in the dark will come to light. And we're going to find out. The question is how much and how damaging is it? And when? When is very important.
Andrew, there already is some traction to this story. I mean, the Obama campaign, I thought, couldn't get out of its way for a while there. But at least this is one track. And, of course, it's like everything, they risk overplaying it. But it at least has some more relevance, I think, to public who've already heard the Bain argument. This one is, wait a minute. Where's your money?
Well, yeah, you've got two arguments in here. One is the tax rate that he's paying. That goes back to what we heard from Occupy Wall Street with the 1% and the 99%. He's paying less in taxes than somebody who's earning, $50,000 a year, at least a lower tax rate. That's one issue. Another issue is, considering how focused he is on revitalizing the American economy. If he's moving a lot of his money offshore to either avoid taxes or also to the benefit of those countries, I think that's an area of concern as well.
All right, well, let's stick with money here. And this one isn't Republican, Democrat. This is, we always knew money had a huge role when it comes to politics and election, but the influence of corporate money in politics, Andrew, we keep talking about this show. I got a feeling after November, people are going to turn around and say, what the heck just happened? My guest knows very well what I'm talking about, but again, give a primer here on just what's unfolding this cycle.
Well, we're talking about Citizens United and the repercussions from that ruling. And thanks to the court decision, corporations and individuals can now funnel unlimited money into campaigns that pay for attack ads and can do so often, at times, anonymously. And that money is starting to add up. The Times reporting this week that corporate-backed super PACs have already spent $100 million on ads so far this cycle. That's 2 out of every 3 issue ads to air so far. Current estimates are that super PACs will spend between $8 and $9 billion with a B, billion dollars in all races this election cycle. Rich.
All right. Now, Congressman, help us out, because first of all, any candidate, Obama would take every dollar he could get. Isn't that right, Dominic? Okay, he's getting outraised here at least. But put this in perspective, because you've run into, and we'll talk about it in a little bit.
It's hard to put it in perspective because the numbers are so huge.
But it's also dangerous, isn't it?
No, let me just say, when I first got elected in the late 80s and early 90s, you were asked to call a union or asked to call a corporation and say, can you contribute $5,000? Then it jumped to 10, then it jumped to 15, then it jumped to 50, then it jumped to 100,000. So McCain-Feingold, it was Shays, me, and in the House, we wanted to enforce the Tillman Act, which passed in 1907, that said no corporate money in campaigns. And then we wanted to enforce the Taft-Hartley Act that said no union dues money in campaigns. We passed campaign finance reform. I'll tell you that McCain said if it's declared unconstitutional, we want to call it Shays-Meehan, and if it's constitutional, McCain-Feingold. And the court originally ruled it constitutional. And so we couldn't ask unions for union dues money or corporations. I thought that made sense. And lo and behold, we have this case that is basically saying a corporation is like a person. And since 1974, you can't limit what an individual person spends as long as they don't coordinate. And now they made the same analogy to a corporation, which I think is crazy. And I think it's destructive. I think it's harmful.
Can you explain why destructive for the person out there who says, hey, you know what, doesn't change my life? Talk about how it could.
Well, you're voting on a bill, and you know a corporation could spend $10 million to defeat you, just that one corporation. That says a lot. Or 20. Or I mean, if these numbers are accurate, I'm blown away by it. I thought maybe you would see 100 million. You're saying that you think they think
between 8 and 9 billion in all races this cycle.
And sadly, the case was decided, I think, 5-4.
Yeah. And we've seen that.
Corporate treasury money shouldn't be in campaigns. Union dues money shouldn't be. Political Action Committee money should, because it's voluntary on the part of individuals and corporations and voluntary on the part of union members. It's not their dues. They have to put money proactively in.
And with now the issues surrounding this is really disclosure. We don't even know, or where some of this money's coming from.
Disclosure is important, and I almost wish that we put more emphasis when we pass McCain-Feingold just on disclosure. Let's just know where this money is coming from. Before the fact, not after.
And believe it or not, there's bipartisan cooperation on something. Remember how foreign it is now, but it actually happened here. All right, now we're talking taxes and tax rates once again, Andrew, and this is a bright line here, certainly as it relates to both Mr. Romney and Mr. Obama.
Well, it's the Bush tax cuts in the news again, Rich. President Obama wants them extended for everybody but the highest earners. Mitt Romney and the Republicans say they won't extend any cuts unless they can extend them all. Quick reminder of what we're talking about. Today, top tax rate 35%. Under Bill Clinton and when Congressman Shays served in the House, the top rate was 39.6%. Rich?
All right, Congressman. If we could do it in 2000, why can't we do it now? There's a material difference to the bottom line, and if so many people say, hey, we got to have offsets. If we're going to spend money here, we're going to bring in less money at the end. It's the same thing in the kitty, right? We got to find offsets for it. Why doesn't it account for tax cuts? Can we really afford to pay less taxes now, given all the concerns over deficit and debt, especially if the top 1% have done pretty good for themselves the last 10 years?
You know what? The sad thing is we got the 1% and the 99%. That has been destructive, and just in terms of the dialogue. The president reminds me of the person who said it's unfair to the 50% who pay no taxes that the 50% who do pay taxes don't pay their fair share. I mean, there's a little bit of absurdity here. There was a time when more Americans paid taxes. Every time Republicans wanted to reduce the tax rate, we reduced it for everyone, and we kicked some people out of paying taxes. I think if you're going to undo the taxes, you bring them all back in. You bring them all back in, not just some. And frankly, we have a more progressive tax rate now than we ever have. We are just having more and more of the very highest income paying most of the taxes to the federal government.
But there's an issue that, to me, it's less about the number of 35 or 39%. And Mitt Romney is the perfect example to me. When people say, wait a second, everybody at this table, we pay taxes on our income.
Right.
And our primary source of income is what you get as a salary, okay? Mm-hmm. Without getting too much into what he did at Bain and what people are paying, people have advantages as it relates to capital gains tax rates here that the general public in their lifetime will never even sniff. To me, it's what is taxable income, what isn't, and write-offs and advantages that are given to a certain select few that aren't to the main. If we focused on that, would there be a better chance there could be some consensus?
So you're focused more on how we redistribute the burden instead of how do we grow the economy. And I'm a how do we grow the economy. Now, if you can convince me that taxing, and first off, this isn't a millionaire's tax like the president always wants to say. It's I think 200
grand and above.
Yeah,
right.
Exactly. It's not a millionaire's tax.
Didn't we grow the economy in the 90s with the same upper end tax rate?
We grew the economy doing a lot of things, but we have had, we're spending too much. We can blame why we're not growing the economy, not on the tax rate, but I think on some other things. We spend too much. Our government's become too bloated. 24% of our spending is government spending. I think that's what's keeping the economy down.
But you know the argument. If you're, and wish you the best of luck, you win, all of a sudden you go back to D.C., they want certain things off the table at the grand old party where they don't want to touch, as it relates to defense and a few other things. You're limited with a few places where you can cut, and we know where that's going to fall.
Well, I will tell you this. When I saw the Republican debate the first time around, they said if you could cut spending, $10 of spending for $1 of tax increase, would you take it? And no one took it. I would have said, would you repeat the question?
Yeah.
You mean I can actually get $10 of spending cuts for $1 tax increase? The problem with the president is his taxes are to spend more money, not to reduce the deficit. And that's a big problem with a lot of us. I mean, all the taxes in the health care bill are for new programs when we already have $1 trillion+ deficit.